I try not to view any of the pieces of who I am as a challenge, and I try to frame them in my mind as opportunities, because I also recognize that if my background or my age wasn't what it was, then I probably wouldn't have done this in the first place. And so part of me likes to think about it and say, okay, well, with all these different areas, are also opportunities, are also chances to make mistakes or learn from others.
Welcome to the Prosper Brief, the show dedicated to elevating the future of the food service and hospitality industry. Today's episode is hosted by Justine Jobe, Vice President of Business Development here at Prosper, and she is joined by Reilly Berk, CEO of Berk Enterprises, and Christine Schindler, CEO and co-founder of PathSpot. Together, they explore what it means to lead with purpose, drive innovation, and redefine success as next-gen leaders.
What would you do if I told you that the difference between good and great when it comes to customer service and leadership isn't this massive overhaul, but it's indeed a game of inches? I'm Reilly, and at Accelerate, I'm going to be bringing you the game of inches, 6 rules for winning in customer service and leadership. Success in business and leadership isn't about making this giant leap. It's about making small, consistent moves that I believe separate the best from the rest. And in our session together, we're going to be breaking down 6 game-changing rules that are going to help you build stronger relationships, exceed expectations, and lead with impact. You're going to walk away with knowing a few things. Number one, you're going to walk away with knowing how to create unforgettable customer experiences. Secondly, you're going to learn the leadership habits that truly drive lasting success. And thirdly, you're going to learn some small moves that I believe turn ordinary into extraordinary. If you want to win, not just today, but every day, this session is for you. Join me at Accelerate, and let's close the gap between where you are and where you could be, 1 inch at a time. We'll see you there.
Well, thank you both for joining me. Obviously, Justine Jobe here on the Prosper Brief podcast. Very grateful to have you both on, Reilly Berk and Christine Schindler, right? Did I say that correctly?
Perfect. So happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. So obviously today's episode, we wanted to focus on young female entrepreneurs. So you guys are both young female CEOs. So I'm going to kick to Reilly first to introduce yourself and maybe your story, journey, how long you've been in the C-suite. Obviously, I know a little bit about your journey, and then would love to pass to Christine after that to share your story.
Sure. So my name is Reilly Berk. I'm the CEO and president of Berk Enterprises. We're a 3rd generation family business, and we've been around 79 years this year. I knew when I was super young that I wanted to join the family business. I was 12 years old when I was like, this is something that I want to be a part of forever. And I started working for the family business when I was 15. Part-time, of course, I was still going to school. But anytime I had a chance during like summer vacation or winter break, I always wanted to be at the office. And that was mostly in a sales support role, visiting customers, going to trade shows. Really enjoyed it. I came back full-time in 2021. And before that, I went to school. I went to grad school, and I was working for another company. My dad called me up in 2021. He's like, we really want you to come back to the office full-time. So I came back in a sales role. That was my plan, basically, to work my way up in that way. And then one day, maybe when I was like in my 50s, my goal was to become the CEO. So I was working in sales, and 2 weeks after that, my dad and the CFO called me down to the conference room, and they're like, hey, you're doing great, but we want you on the leadership team. We want to make you the director of operations. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, but didn't really know what that meant. And, that was also peak COVID supply chain crisis mode, but wouldn't change a thing because it allowed me to learn about another side of the business that I wasn't as familiar with. And then the following year, I'm like just starting to get the hang of things, and things are going better. And my dad said, okay, I want to make you the CEO. So definitely, was not a part of my plan. That happened when I was 24. So as you can imagine, that was pretty crazy. But I've been in my role now for 3 years. And I guess I forgot to mention too, just from the beginning, at a high level, we're a supplier of food service disposables and custom packaging. So think like cutlery, straws, cups, to-go containers, and then novelty drinkware and promotional packaging for restaurant chains and distributors, in the fair and carnival industry as well. So that's kind of high level my journey.
Yeah, I love it. I have so many more questions and excited to dive into that. But yes, let's get Christine's story as well, because I know when I both met you, I was very excited to introduce you to. So I'm so grateful you were able to join the podcast, and we'll share Christine's story next.
Amazing. Yes, I'm so honored to be on this podcast with you both. My name is Christine Schindler. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at PathSpot. A little bit of my story and background and how I ended up in this role. I originally studied biomedical engineering and global and public health. And I had started my career totally on the research side and the engineering side of the world. And I spent time living and working in the developing world, mostly in the Kilimanjaro region. And I was building really low cost, durable equipment for very resource constricted settings. Think, how do I make technology work when there's no Wi-Fi and no power, and in a lot of cases, no ceiling? And when I returned to the US, I was working full time as an engineer in the healthcare space in hospital settings. But I just started to see all of these public health issues here domestically with a really different lens. Fortunately, our hospital network had access to all of these medical equipment and devices and stable situations for those. But there were so many opportunities in just day-to-day life that I felt like could benefit from low cost, durable, accessible medical technologies. And one of them at the time, I was seeing all these issues around foodborne illness outbreaks, people getting incredibly sick, hospitalizations, even deaths from these outbreaks, right? That
And
cost.
what year is this, Christine?
This is back in like 2017. And so at the time, everyone was saying like, it's lettuce, it's cereal. And now it's like, it's onions, it's all these things, right? But I was looking at it, and as a biomedical background, I was thinking, okay, but lettuce doesn't spawn illness. Like it's not lettuce. It's something going on with the process for the lettuce. And I started diving into what that was. Why is this actually happening? And it turns out that it is 100% preventable. It's all in human hands. It's hand washing and hygiene. It's proper temperature control. It's proper expiration management. And I realized that there was no technology tools to help us do that. It was, a bunch of pieces of paper in the back office and a sign that said, wash your hands before returning to work. And I thought, in our current technology driven age, why is there nothing that can stop these massive issues? And so, I'm an engineer, I'm a nerd. I started just iterating algorithms in the apartment bathroom, and I isolated the core contaminants behind these harmful illnesses. I literally had a bunch of wires taped to a dinner plate, and I just started going door to door of restaurants. I would get up at 6 a.m. and knock on doors till midnight on my weekends. And when everyone said, I've waited 10 years for something like this to exist, I quit my job and I started building it. And so now, flashing forward, PathSpot is a holistic system for all things back of house safety and operations. We have a technology suite of several different products that hit all of those core areas for making sure that team members have the right technology-based support to be able to keep all of their safety and audits and all those components in check, so they can focus on the things they do best, like culinary and food preparation and focusing on the guest. And so really honored to be here and to get to share that story.
Yeah, that's amazing. So at what age did you become CEO?
I was 24.
Wow. Okay. So you did all of what you described of like your learning journey. Now, what was the process of creating your business?
Yeah, so for me, it started out with really like trying to figure out what the technology stack would be, and how we would actually be able to build the equipment itself, right? That was the first question. Is I had all these hypotheses about the impact, but also how to actually create the technology. And I was really fortunate to find, in my process of knocking on doors, getting as many introductions as I could, find some incredible restaurant operators and founders that were willing to, that saw the vision that I was trying to accomplish and were willing to let me really try it out in their locations. And in the beginning, I would just sit in the restaurants for hours and hours and hours and watch, because oftentimes people say like, well, you need to have the technology ready before you install it. But for me, that wasn't the case. I needed to make sure that the equipment was actually going to work and that people were going to understand and use it correctly. If I had guessed how to make it work best for a restaurant, I would have gotten it wrong. But the best way to get that feedback is from the users. So I would sit for hours and hours and hours in the restaurants and watch them use it. And then I would stay up all night and I'd build a new version of the product. And I'd come back the next day and have them try that one. And I did that for about 6 months until we had the first versions of the product ready to go. And fortunately, at that point, we were able to raise venture capital funding. We've now raised over $25 million to support the business.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. Well, I think what you both really always bring out to me is really kind of how the hustle power. I know Christine and I talked about this, and how both of you have this type of hustle mentality. And I wanted to highlight that. Like, Reilly, I know before you go to conferences, for example, you had told me that you have a list printed out, pictures listed out, like very strategically, going through who you would like to partner with, target with, build a relationship, getting those pictures in front of you to make sure that every interaction is meaningful. Christine, obviously you just shared how you were hustling, staying up late, doing all these things. It's very interesting, especially because, so I'm, 37? Christine, how old are you again?
I'm 30.
30. And then what are you, Reilly, 27?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I'm sure you guys feel similar, but at least in my day and age of like kind of the tech startups, it was very like work-life balance and playing ping pong at work and drinking at work, or like this culture of trying to be happy at work, which is obviously great. But what I've really recognized in you guys and is different than I think what's being pushed into our culture for like up and coming leaders is like that hustle power. Like, how do you make sure that you're really kind of feet on the ground? So Reilly, would love for you to share like your mentality, and how it does blur lines or the work hours. I'm just curious your perspective on that, and would love to pass to Christine.
Sure. Yeah. So don't get me wrong. I mean, of course, we're all about having a good time at work and making it enjoyable. But I think for me, our company's been around 79 years, but, we've been more in this food service space since the 90s. And my father's done an incredible job of getting the company to where we are today. But I have really big goals and plans of really trying to take it to another level. And so I think, time is money. And I think a lot of the events and conferences that I go to, if we're going to take time away from the office, I really want to maximize, and get as much out of that show. So yeah, to your point, I do a lot of prep work before a meeting, before a conference. I'll even, make binders to prep. And I really do try to understand like who's going to be there and what's their background, and just trying to learn so that when I see them in public, I'm ready to go. And I think too that the customers and people I come across appreciate that I know about their brand, and I know about their values and what they stand for. So I think it really just comes down to wanting to grow my company quickly, and I just being willing to take the time up front to study and focus and to truly maximize, going to these events and things.
Yeah, amazing. Let's pass to Christine, but I do have a follow-up question for both of you, because I did obviously share just an example of how you're hustling, Reilly, but I'd love for you to share an example that maybe I don't know about. But yeah, Christine, let's pass to you of like, how your hustle mentality, I mean, obviously you just shared with us an example, and I've seen it as well. So would love for you to touch on that.
Yeah, I think when you have the opportunity in front of you and there is this finite period of time to be able to make something happen, it does look different than different businesses and different stages. And, I had to come to terms with that. And I have to be honest about that with any team member that wants to join the company at this stage. It does not look like a normal 9 to 5. It is, you're constantly on, we're constantly responding to clients, getting back to them. And in the early days, especially, there was a finite period of time of wanting to see if it was going to work, desiring to get it out there and getting that feedback as quickly as possible, so that we could bring this into the world and capture on, now especially the momentum that's behind us. And I think keeping momentum going means rising to the occasion with that momentum. And I think it's about, recognizing and being honest that it's going to look different at this stage of the company, at this stage of the business. And finding the right fit for both team members and for myself, where I'm excited and that's what I want to do. And we want to be bringing that energy and that momentum to clients. And it's a 24/7 thing. There's often times where I have an opportunity internationally that I want to be on a call with. And that means, calls at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Reilly, I see you nodding because you probably are in a similar position, but I don't want to wait on that conversation. I want to have it now. And I think that energy at the same time, while obviously, it has to be the right fit for the team and for someone who wants to jump in and start a brand new startup and a brand new technology. But I think it also can be so rewarding, so energizing to be able to be in an environment where there's too many opportunities. There's many times in the office when it's Friday afternoon and our team's like, I don't want it to be Friday afternoon. I wish it was Monday. And that's what I really captivate on. There's so much work that we want to be doing because we have this opportunity, as we really feel, to truly change the way that these businesses can operate when it comes to safety. And when you feel that in your veins, all the extra hours and work, while it can be long, they don't always feel like work. They feel like, making a real difference.
So yeah, on that note, outside of maybe working a lot, right? That's not the only way to hustle. What is maybe another example that you feel you maybe go above and beyond and hustle? Or is it preparation? Is it, being on the road a little more? What is it specifically right now in your current job? And then tell me again how long you've been CEO. Has it been 10 years? No.
It's been about 7 years. I think for me, it's all about hustle power. To me, really is connected to your level of urgency. And every opportunity that comes in my mind, met with that level of urgency. Customer support issue comes in. We want to have a 2-minute response time. We want to get back to them instantly. A new inquiry comes in, someone's interested in being a part of the business. We want to talk to them in that moment that they're interested and get in front of them. So I think hustle power is about, constantly having urgency around the opportunity in front of you. And that could be opportunities that you're responding to, but it can also be opportunities that you don't know exist, leaving space for ideas and then acting with urgency on those ideas. If I have an idea on a new product line or a customer mentioned something that I think could be really cool, I might spend that weekend prototyping it and trying to make it happen because I want to see it come out into the world. And so I really correlate the enthusiasm and urgency behind all those different opportunities with the hustle. So it doesn't always be the same, right? It's a variable based on what the thing is that needs to be urgent in that moment. But I think that's part of what makes it exciting. Reilly, I don't know, you were nodding at the urgency piece. Do you agree with me?
No, absolutely. I think people want things instantly, and I think it's super important. It can make or break. If a customer reaches out and they want pricing or they want more information, if you get back to them in 10 minutes or you get back to them in a week, I think you're going to have more luck if you can get back to them quickly. So I absolutely agree. And I think some other ways where I interpret kind of this hustle mentality for me, I'm really trying to get involved with many different industry events. So not only going to these trade shows and conferences, but getting on the board, speaking at panels, being in different advisory groups. For me, that is a way that I hustle, trying to get our name out there and let people know how we can help them. So always looking for ways to get involved in the industry and to get the Berk name out there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like for me, a hustle power is like, I notice when things are like challenging or maybe off kilter, or like, sales were down in previous positions, like the best advice I've always been given is if things are like not where you want them to be, like put your head down for 3 months or 2 months and just absolutely grind and, kind of shut out the noises. So whether that's, with weight loss goals or health goals or job goals or finance goals, like if you just shut down the noise or like shut things down for 2 months and just absolutely grind or really get focused and laser focused on work, any specific topic, I feel like once you look up in 2 months, you're like, oh, okay, like that problem I was feeling or that uncertainty or that challenge I had, like I feel like it's getting better. I noticed that for me, even in this job of like, okay, like if you just constantly go after those little things and hustle every day to achieve the little things and do that consistently for 2 months, like when you lift your head up, you're in a completely different spot. And I think that's kind of my hustle power. Not that you were asking me, but
no, I think that's a great point. And Christine, I don't know if you agree, but I think sometimes a struggle of being in the seat is that there's always so much happening, right? There's always so many things that we can get involved with. And sometimes it is hard to like, buckle down and like really focus on those most important things. But I feel like when we can do that, that is when we thrive, and that is when we were the most successful. So kind of navigating that, where to devote your time, I think, throughout the day. But if you can really buckle down, to your point, Justine, and just focus, I think that's when we see the most success.
Well, Reilly, it sounded like you were doing that too. And sorry, Christine, to interrupt, but I want the same question for you of like, Reilly recently has been like, a little more focused, would you say, on sales? Or I know you have taken kind of on like, okay, I have these growth goals, I have this going on. So I'm going to pivot or exactly like cut out some of this noise and try to focus in on this. But Christine, what were you going to add?
No, I completely agree. I think that when you have a clear focus, both on what are the big projects and initiatives I'm going to drive forward this quarter, this month, sometimes even this week, and also, what are the little things that I want to make sure get done, Justine, to help, to your point, to help support those goals. It also makes it so that when you do have, obviously in this role, there is a lot of things that need to be done. But when you get a free hour or something cancels, you know exactly what you're doing in that moment. And so you optimize your time, I think, because of that. And I think for myself, a lot of it is how do I also eliminate other distractions? Like, for example, I don't have any form of social media. I don't have, ways outside.
Yeah, we miss you. We are trying to keep up with you, Christine. Hello.
For me, it's like that's not related to the business goals or my personal goals of what we need to accomplish right now, right? So in eliminating certain things, and at different points in life or different years, that looks different. And saying I'm going to truly like sequester certain things that aren't for the benefit of those big goals, and to like really look at it and go back to that. And then I review those lists like at the end of the week, and I'm like, how good of a job did I do at making sure that I time boxed and used my time appropriately to meet my personal and professional goals and push those things forward? Because I think focus is so critical. There's so many different pieces that you can get pulled into that can take. And if you add up the hours of that could be a whole nother avenue of the business that you would have time to unlock.
I have a great next question that I've been dying to ask. I had to warm you guys up, of course. But what do you think has been the biggest challenge in your role, along with a million of things, but between your age or your gender, what has been challenging or most challenging?
Okay. I think something that has been the most challenging is just being taken seriously. Being not only just being a woman, but being my age. I remember early on, we had a vendor come in for a meeting, and I went out to greet them. I shook their hands, thanked them so much for coming in to visit us. And they're like, oh yeah, like great to meet you, but like, where's your dad? So that's been a challenge. It's gotten a lot better over time, but I think that is an obstacle sometimes. That's frustrating because although
has it been harder to be young or a woman, or like?
I think think harder to be young. I think it's been harder to be young personally. There's been a lot of support on the women's side, and I think we've seen the shift in our industry. There's a lot of other, female CEOs and CFOs with Handles and Firebirds and so many other amazing chains. So it's been great to see that. I think the biggest challenge has been on the age side and just being taken seriously. But, although I've grown up in this industry, and I've technically been in this industry and at my company for 12 years. So, yeah, that's been the hardest part.
What do you think, Christine?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I try not to view any of the pieces of who I am as a challenge, and I try to frame them in my mind as opportunities, because I also recognize that if my background or my age wasn't what it was, then I probably wouldn't have done this in the first place. And so part of me likes to think about it and say, okay, well, with all these different areas, are also opportunities, are also chances to make mistakes or learn from others. And I really try to round out our leadership team and our advisory board with experts that have those different pieces. So I have that support around me. And then because I have that support, I can allow my age or my background to really help me to thrive and to bring different perspectives and opinions into the chance. So I don't think I would change it. I really don't. Like, I think I worry that if something was different, then I wouldn't have been drawn to this problem. I wouldn't have wanted to solve it and create the solution. And maybe I wouldn't have in the first place. I often think about, I talked to one of my earliest advisors, and she was running a very extensive and incredible laboratory and a university. And she said to me, sometimes undergrads are my favorite because they solve problems that are quote unquote unsolvable, because they don't know that they're unsolvable. If you ask a PhD student, they're like, well, that problem's not possible to be solved, and I know that, and so they're not capable of solving it. But sometimes you get an undergrad who approaches the problem from a different way, doesn't know that it's not a solvable problem, and then ends up solving it. And, I think that being young in this industry, having different backgrounds, looking at problems from different ways, that allows me to solve problems that maybe I wouldn't have been able to solve if I was at a different position or point in my career.
Well, that's kind of the next question I was going to ask is like, what do you feel is the biggest advantage of your age? Reilly, what would you share on that?
Yeah, I think because of my age, it's allowed me to stand out. I think with youthfulness comes a sense of energy, and I think people are gravitated toward that. They like the energy, they like the passion, and because of that, they're more willing to, be open to, having a conversation, giving me a referral, letting me in on kind of what's going on in the industry. So I think it's, although it was a challenge early on, I do think it's more of an advantage to me. And I think that the industry has been really open to that and accepting. And I'm very grateful for those people that, despite my age and despite being a woman, they've kind of taken me in and embraced it. And like I said, I think they love the energy and passion. And I think, Christine, it's evident that you have that as well as you speak about your background and your company. So I think it's been more positive for sure than negative.
Yeah, I feel like that's what I love most about this industry. Two things. I do feel like, obviously, we touched on hustle power. I think this industry is so wonderful yet challenging because everyone has almost like been in the grinding phase, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very much, it's not like, oh, I got here because of this, or I stepped into this role because of this. It's like, no, a lot of people really work their way from the ground up. And that's actually, I know, Reilly, you're an accelerator, and part of the Prosper Forum, we're now doing the Accelerator Conference. And a lot of that story is being shared of how to, get these emerging leaders, how there can be an opportunity from the ground floor to the C-suite. And I think what we're really seeing in the industry is how everyone really does rally around the young, ambitious, emerging leaders, like having, different perspectives, having that energy. Like at least for me, I don't feel like there's a lot of like gatekeeping or blocking. Like it feels every conference I go to, it feels so welcoming and energizing. And yes, like, okay, how can we connect each other? When I was in tech industry, I didn't feel like that was as open or easy to navigate. Obviously, I'm in a different place now where we're trying to cultivate that journey. Um, but I definitely feel like this industry is so wonderful in that you build authentic relationships and then people are really working to pull each other along. Christine, I know Reilly and I have even shared referrals and have a ton of mutual friends now that have really helped us and inspire us. What about you, Christine, as far as like people that have like really been leading you along your journey?
Oh, I completely agree. And I think, also in this industry, you mentioned how people have always, they recognize the grind, but I also think that in this world of hospitality, in this world of service, the grind continues. You don't find people that like get later in their career and want to check out. They stay engaged. They want to see their customers succeed. They stay in the thick of it and desire to see that continued. Every engagement with a customer as or a guest is an opportunity for success, as an opportunity to build a champion. And so I love that about this industry. And I totally agree. I mean, we're so fortunate to have, investors and advisors and mentors and supporters. I could list, 100 people in the industry who've helped and supported and have belief in the vision and the mission. And I think that is such a testament to this group. I feel like everyone in hospitality like truly wants each other to succeed and wants to see the business grow. It doesn't feel like there's competition, even among competitive companies, right? Because at the end of the day, providing great guest experience, providing great food, providing places where people feel safe to eat, and for us within the safety ecosystem, having a safe place to eat impacts every other competitor in the organization as well, right? Because if one restaurant has a safety issue, many other restaurants, people won't go out to eat there either, right? Even if it's a totally different brand. And so it becomes this like very collaborative world where our customers are sharing the impact of our solution with their competitors because they want to elevate safety across the board and because they truly believe in the solution being able to be something that does that. And so I think those are the things that get really powerful and feel so unique about this incredible world that we all get the opportunity to be in together.
Yeah. Now, thinking of that, we're obviously highlighting some of the positives. I'd love to touch on some of the challenges. What are some of the bigger challenges being a young female CEO? And I'm not even sure that young and female need to be in the conversation. I just am more curious from both your perspectives, being a CEO, right? It's like that has, at least in my world, it's always been kind of that shiny title that like you almost want to strive for. Obviously, as I get older, you find out like, no, there's so many different things to do, and you don't just have to be a CEO to be successful. But what's your perspective? I guess I'll pass to Reilly and then we'll go to Christine.
Yeah, I think that macro environments are always a challenge, whether it's managing political environments with tariffs right now, that's really relevant, managing workforce, labor issues. I think those are always challenges. But I think, what's always been a priority for me is remaining kind of that calm presence at the top. I believe that I set the culture, I set the tone. So regardless of what's happening out of our company, it's important to remain that like steady, strong leader. You're setting the tone, the vision, the strategy, letting your employees know that no matter what, we're going to be okay. So I think kind of juggling some of those challenges, and these things are coming up all of the time. But again, just having that focus and vision and sticking to that and, working with the team to get it done.
That's great perspective. Christine, what about
That
you?
is, I totally agree with that. It's very real that you could just be having a bad day personally and people are like calling their parents being like, I think something's wrong at the company. And you're like, no, nothing's wrong. Just having a bad day. So like you're definitely like a weather teller in that way and have to like constantly, be showcasing that. I think, one thing that's definitely challenging, especially about being younger as you enter into one of these roles, for myself at least, I had never directly managed anyone before starting the business. And so, you are an engineer, you invent something, and then after raising capital, building the team is obviously so critical, and having the right team around you is what allows you to weather all of those storms, right? And so I think one of the challenging points for me is having not had experience in that, having not had models really even in that, being so early in my career, finding people that, one, were going to respect, the vision and strategy and components that do come with building a business at a young age, but also we're going to be the right people to, not take advantage of you, to not, but be the people that were going to really build the business with you. And I think creating and building a strong team, being so critical to the health and wellness of a business, is really challenging when you are young and maybe just haven't had experience in that. And so, I feel so grateful now to know that I have the right leadership team and infrastructure around me to be so confident in that. But that took time, and is definitely a challenging point that I think, Prosper does such a great job with. Huge kudos, Justine, to you and the team for really creating resources and infrastructure around these pieces, because things that might be really easy or feel simple in another environment is something that is a skill and a muscle that needs to be built and created. And I think that is grateful to have the opportunity to do.
I was going to ask too of so when you face challenges, where is your safe space? How do you navigate that personally, professionally?
No, I mean, for me, I'm so grateful to have a strong leadership team that we're constantly evaluating these different components with, and also to have, a really strong set of investors and advisors who are able to help me navigate those different nuances and components, and to be able to have those conversations, because you also do need to be able to have raw, honest feedback. And I think it has to be multiple viewpoints. Like, a lot of what's so critical in our health of the business is being able to go to multiple streams that I trust, get different perspectives on how to handle critical situations. And that might be from other founders. Oftentimes it comes from other founders who have started businesses, but are at the next stage in their career and experience with those businesses, and can and are willing to share their perspectives. And also it makes you realize that many of the challenges you face are not new. Something that has happened to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the most insane thing that can happen. I have no idea how to handle it. And I called 3 other founders, who have IPO'd or their business to be huge. And they're like, oh, is that the first time that's happened to you? Okay, yeah, here's how I usually handle it. Playbook, here's the person you should talk to. This is a great resource. And you're like, it makes you suddenly feel like, okay, I have a support system, I have a network. And I really try to be that, for founders that are earlier stage than me. Someone's trying to raise their first round of venture capital, and they call me and they're like, have you ever seen anything like this? And I'm like, yes, I have seen that exact same situation. And so I think one of the best networks for being an early stage CEO, early stage founder, is other CEOs and founders, because being able to have honest and open dialogue, even the number of times in this conversation that Reilly says something or I say something, the 2 of us are like, yes, I totally relate. Really grateful to have that support from both peers and other stages of founders in the process.
What you said about the energy and coming in, I think I would struggle with that. I'm certainly trying to get better at my poker face, but I am a very animated, emotional, wear my heart on my sleeve. So I've always wanted to be developed and go into leadership, but it's very challenging. I'm okay, I want to just manage my lane. So to your point of okay, yeah, people, if you walk in and had a bad day, it couldn't be related to the business, but maybe everybody thinks it's related. So yeah, how do you manage that, Reilly?
Well, I think, to Christine's point, you can't do it alone. It takes a village. And I feel fortunate to have a strong leadership team. My father, who's in more of an advisory consultant role now, peer groups, mentors that I can go to. But I think also it's important to know, we're a 3rd generation family business, and we have these real relationships. And I think it's also good for my employees to see like I'm a real person too. And if something's stressing me out, of course I try to keep my composure and, always be positive. But I think something special that we have is that trust and that openness, and we can be real with each other. And I think that helps too. So I think, just leaning on the team, and then also knowing that it's okay sometimes when you're overwhelmed or stressed out, that you don't have to keep it all in, right? Like, this is just a part of doing business. And I think when your team knows, what's going on, then they can help you out.
Yeah. Okay. So on that note, so I'm now a part of, obviously, kind of a family business, a small business. And I know my dad personally feels like, I think we've got 10 team members, and he jokes now that it's, I don't know, 25 kids, right? I have 4 kids. They have these many kids. So within the team, we've got, a certain amount of kids to support. And to me, I'm like, oh my God, that feels so heavy. Like, I'm just curious, like, do you feel that way?
Yes.
Is there like, I just can't imagine. I mean, I obviously carry the weight of 4 little humans. I'm like, okay, like, their livelihood rise and dies on me. But like, running your own company, there is some of that. What do you think of that? How do you handle that? How do you manage that stress and pressure?
No, it's definitely real. And I think, honestly, regardless of your age, regardless of if you're a woman or a man, I think that pressure is real. Having the responsibility of, I have 100 employees, so having the weight of that and their families, it's very real. But I think it's also something that keeps me motivated and keeps me going. Not wanting to let them down, not wanting to let our customers down, having so many goals to grow within our industry. So I think, although of course it is, stressful at times, just that weight and that pressure, I think it also keeps me going and keeps me motivated to continue moving the company forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also recognizing that, it's also an opportunity to be able to provide a safe, like, strong work environment for team members, and also recognizing that those team members are making their choice, in working there. And I think about that a lot too. I had a team member who was, in the office on a Saturday with me, and I said, I want you to be able to go home and be with your family. And he looked me dead in the eye and he was like, this is for my family. I want to see like how big this business can get. I want to do that so that I can use that to support my family. Like, let me make this choice. And so that was also a good call out for me, that our team members have autonomy. They're also owners in the business. We're very intentional in sharing stock options with all of our team members. And we want that mentality. And so it's also about letting our team act as owners and be a part of that ownership. And when that happens, the burden doesn't feel so big. Everyone's carrying it together.
Yeah, that's incredible outlook. Absolutely. Because I know I'm like an activator. I like want to problem solve or just jump into, fixing a problem. And so to your point of like, okay, people are here making their choices and they're here building this company as well. I think that too is like what's so amazing about this industry or being in smaller companies, that it does become a team, becomes a family of everyone's like rowing the ship in the same direction. But yeah, I think that's wonderful. I applaud you both. I don't know if I could do what you both do. I like to stay in my lane. But that is the thing about this industry as well, is everyone wears so many different hats. Obviously, people say that about small companies, startups. It is really interesting. Like, I've been at Prosper now for about 1.5 years. I've really seen firsthand of like, you just jump in and get in there. I know, Christine, I think I was seeing you in Vegas and you're like, oh, I'm going to go fix an oven. I got to go to a customer or go do something. I'll be on site. I'll come to, see you for a cocktail after, but like, I'm literally in the ovens behind the kitchen or doing whatever you were doing. So
that's so true. Like, lanes blur very quickly in this world, but I think that's a good thing, right? It's, how do we, and that's part of the ownership component. How are we all acting as owners? We have engineers, customer support calls because we need it, and hey, we don't want that to go to go not through. We have our customer team jumping in and helping engineering QA. And that goes for my role as well, right? And I think actually at a small business, that provides a lot of opportunity for learning. Like in a company, you may be in a position where you can stay in your lane and there is enough infrastructure and team support to jump into those other things. But one of the things I try to do is I pitch, the fact that we're all wearing many hats. We're all jumping in on different things. Like one of the things I ask in my leadership interviews is like, are you going to carry boxes to FedEx on Friday night? Because everyone goes to FedEx at this company. If there's a customer order that needs to get shipped out and it hasn't gotten shipped out, anyone in this company is going to go to FedEx and drop that off and make sure it gets to the customer before Monday. But I think that's also a real opportunity, especially actually if you're considering, and someone on this podcast is earlier in their career and interested, joining a small business allows you to see so many pieces of a puzzle and imagine yourself in those different roles. And we've had team members, switch between different roles or different things that may not even have known they were interested in it because we were so small and all working together, they got that exposure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Christine, how big's your team now?
We're about 30 people full time right now.
Okay, amazing. And you're split between, was it Dallas and New York?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, amazing. Well, fantastic. Well, I feel like this has been phenomenal. I do have one more question for you guys as far as I'm just curious. Now, I personally, I grew up with 2 older brothers, so I didn't ever have this whole, I'm going to be a woman in this role. It was just you are who you are, just go out and get a job and survive. But I'm curious if you have any passion for women in the executive role. Is there anything that you would say to young women, how to, build their careers or strive to the CEO role? What's your perspective on that? And again, I've been in sales my whole life, so I never really dove into that. But to Reilly's point, her and I went to Whirl in Nashville. It was phenomenal. And there is such a phenomenal camaraderie that, again, in this industry is so authentic. So I definitely find myself gravitating more towards that, where prior I was always working with men in sales and we had the same numbers, same quota, same everything. So I never was really building my whole women in executive leadership or hopes for those tracks. I'm just curious though, for you guys, what has been your perspective and journey and or recommend to others?
Go ahead, Christine, you can go. I think it's been exciting. Like I mentioned, over time, we've definitely seen more women jumping into some of these C-suite positions. I remember last year, actually at Whirl, I got to introduce the keynote panel, which was the Women of Whataburger, or the She-Suite. They have so many incredible women in their C-suite, but I think it's great. And I think that that's going to continue. I think there's been so many amazing organizations, Women in Restaurant Leadership, Women in Food Service, Women's Food Service Forum, creating these spaces and events where people are uplifting each other up and supporting each other. It's so much fun and it's so great to be a part of. And I think as far as advice for anyone looking to advance their career, become a CEO, you're so capable. It doesn't matter how old you are, what your background is. I think just being confident and, again, being passionate, people can feel that passion. If you're passionate about what you do, you're passionate about your team, your company, then I truly believe that you can go as far as you want. You just have to believe in yourself and be confident.
I totally agree. And I love that, beacon for us all, Reilly. And in addition, I also am and try to be a really big spokesperson when it comes to women in technology and in engineering fields. I actually started a nonprofit organization called Girls Engineering Change that brings college students together with younger students to help build equipment that gets donated somewhere in the world, so girls can draw the connection between engineering and social impact careers. Oftentimes when you hear engineering, you think bridges and cars, and so many young girls are passionate about careers that can make an impact and make a difference. And so really working to draw those parallels and lines. And I think, I feel so encouraged by opportunities and components out there that encourage women to come together. And I also feel so encouraged by women on stages that aren't necessarily, only for women. And I find that really empowering. And I can look to women in those roles. And I think visualization is so critical, and being able to be a part of that visualization and technique. I was fortunate to be a part of a women in entrepreneurship program where we went to offices of CEOs who had grown their businesses, exited their companies, or IPO'd their businesses. And we got to visualize ourselves doing that, and also realizing that it's not all perfect. To our conversation of earlier, there's not one to all of this. It's not all a flawless experience. And that doesn't mean that it's not great. And not letting, perfect be the enemy of incredible in those moments, and being able to visualize those. I think, Reilly and I being on this podcast, sharing, hearing Reilly, you share your vulnerable components, like the things that aren't perfect, the things that you're working on, the ways that you're accomplishing that to me is the most inspiring, because it showcases that you don't have to be perfect to do it. And I think that creates the opportunity and avenue for more women to go out and do it.
Yes. Yeah.
You're never going to be perfect, right? No one is, no matter what your gender or background is. We're all doing, it's more the mentality to Reilly's ending of, how do we just rise and take the opportunity in front of us and give it everything you have.
Well, that's amazing. Well, I'm super grateful for both of you joining the podcast today. Thank you for being on the Prosper Brief. Honored to have you here and greatly look forward to seeing you both in the future.
Big thanks to Reilly and Christine for this inspiring conversation. If today's episode resonated with you, take a moment to follow the Prosper Brief and share it with someone who's ready to lead differently. We'll see you next time here on the Prosper Brief.